The thing that really propelled Grimes into being more of an indie darling in the 2010s was the thing that is visions. I could have came up with a better word than thing, but I've said it now. More specifically, the singles from this album. Genesis and Oblivion, which, by the way, the streets don't forget. The streets will never forget when Pitchfork did that list where they talked about the best songs and the best albums of the 2010s. Halfway through the 2010s, they did like a mid-decade list, and Oblivion was number one on their songs list. It was number one. It was what they called their best song of the 2010s so far in like 2014, whenever they did it. And I feel like people forget that. I don't think it ended up being number one on the overall decade list, but yeah, she got number one for that. Kind of crazy. The album itself, Visions, was pretty critically well received, with also some skepticism about who Grimes was as an artist at the time. I think some people didn't really take to her sound very well, and I think years later people have become more accepting of her sound generally, but there's still a bit of a split where you seem to get people that really don't like her music at all, but then you've got the really dedicated fans that absolutely adore everything she puts out. It's like any artist, I guess, but it always feels like her album releases are more polarizing because there's just always such a huge split opinion on the album at the time of its release. It's become even more distressing to read about and talk about her music now, given the Elon Musk affiliation that completely disheveled her reputation. I don't know the right word for it, but her reputation just went in such a strange direction once it came out that they were together. They were together for quite a few years. They had a child, and she just became a bit of a meme because obviously she kept saying things and tweeting things that were quite strange. They named their child the way that they named their child. It just made the aura of Grimes become so confusing to the point where I don't even know if people like love her music anymore. I don't know. I don't know how people feel about her music these days. It's a whirlwind of weirdness that's happened since this album, and to be honest, I'm just here to talk about the album itself, despite the fact that her progression since then has been pretty strange and interesting to discuss. But at the end of the day, the album itself, I don't know, man. Going back to it 10 years later, I will say, it's not sounding as bad as I remember. I really hated it back when I first heard it. I could not stand that shit. But I will say, I don't think it's quite as bad. It's just really dull and unimaginative. And I think the album is aiming to be and feel creative and imaginative, but it honestly just falls so short because of the biggest crux of the album, the Achilles heel, the crux of the issue, the vocals. It's just not captivating to listen to at all. You get these ethereal moments that are supposed to kind of be atmospheric, but because her voice is just so thin and airy, like on a track like Genesis, you're just left not really feeling much from the music. I mean, I'm not anyway, because there's just so little going on. And this happens pretty much all the time. Be a Body is just her doing these like vocal riffs. And I say vocal riffs because it doesn't really feel like anything's been sort of jotted down as an idea. It just kind of sounds like she's just sort of improvising on the spot, which I kind of like the idea of just doing that over some synths, I guess, but it just ends up sounding like she's improvising over some random sounding synths. There are moments where it works in her favour. I think Symphonia sounds like Grouper if she was to make something more in the synth direction, a more ethereal pop sort of sound if Grouper were to do that. But on this occasion, I'd at least say the vocals sound prettier than they do across most of the album, but it's still kind of just there in the background, not really providing much at all. It's not maintaining my attention the whole way through. It just sounds nice, and that's at least the most high praise I can give it. I also feel the same about Vowels as well. I think this track, at least her vocals mix in with the instrumental a bit better on this one. I think it's not much to sort of praise, but I'm trying to find things across the album that I'm wanting to praise. It's little things like that I can kind of just go, Yeah, okay, I'll give her that one. But the most bizarre moment on the whole thing has got to be 8. Don't know what's going on here. The robotic vocals that sound like something from Africa Bambaataa, circa 1986. It's so commanding and just cuts through the atmosphere in such a jarring way. It's insane the way this track sounds, to be honest. And then, of course, her shrill chipmunk vocals coming through. This song belongs in hell, my friends. If I ever go to hell, this song is going to play. The fuck is going on this track, I cannot tell you, but it is at least experimental. I'll give her that one. Like, she is certainly putting out music here that she just thought, I'll just do whatever and see if it works. It's hard to not really view Oblivion as the best track on the album, to be honest. As my good friend Ricky put it well, this album does just feel like Oblivion and 12 of the tracks. This just is the standout. And I will say, over time, this song isn't sounding as good as I remembered. I used to like it. I've not heard it in a long time, but going back to it, I thought I enjoyed it more than I do now. I think maybe there was a time I probably did enjoy it more, but these days, not so much. The thing that becomes noticeable is that it is a catchy track, but by the end, I just think that the instrumental gets played out. And she's doing a lot more with her vocals on this one, even though it's a subtle change. She's kind of like hitting notes quite well, and she's sort of doing more of a melodic singing rather than just kind of doing just sort of like a toddler going around the house and making as many new sounds as they possibly can. And it's annoying the parents because it just sounds so shrill and weird and annoying the whole time. That's kind of what she's doing across this whole album. This is the only track where it doesn't feel like that, to be honest. It just feels purposeful, and I appreciate that. And then we've got Skin at the end, which, look, all the issues that come with the vocals on this album, if you want to just hear that for 6 minutes, that's this song. She gave me 6 minutes of the same thing. And the instrumental sounds like it could be dramatic, and it just doesn't hit. It just doesn't hit. I feel like she could have done way more with this instrumental. It could have been a really epic, grand feeling song, and it just falls flat. Yeah, I don't like this album. You can tell, you can see that. It's pretty flat, it's dull, it's unimaginative, and I think it's trying to be imaginative, but it just doesn't feel it like anywhere on the album. And it just isn't aging that well either as time goes on. Even the tracks that I thought were good aren't that good anymore. They're decent, but nothing I really would say is amazing or anything like that. One thing I will sign off with, though, is that you have to appreciate the influence this album's had. I think there's a lot of singers that look to Grimes and want to do and aspire to be like her. Her kind of carefree nature, her wackiness that is presented across her entire persona, and even down to interviews where she just says really odd things. I think that is quite an influential thing on music. I think there's a lot of singers out there at the moment basically that kind of want to do what Grimes was doing, mostly with the music, because I think that kind of ethereal, airy, whispery vocal approach has become pretty much a mainstay for a lot of indie singers. And I think, again, not to say that Grimes invented it, but I think she was pretty pivotal in making that a cool thing. And as much as I don't like this album, you can't deny the influence. Some things are just there, and you have to point it out and respect it. And that's what this album has done. So, it might not be for me. It's certainly not something I enjoy, and certainly not something I would even recommend to many people, to be honest. But the foundations, the approach, the style has lived on. It's lived on. I think it has. I think it's done more for music than people might realise. And maybe not just this album specifically, but Grimes in general. So yeah, I've got to respect it. A decade later, you've got to respect those things in these videos. You've got to point out what has changed in that 10-year span. And certainly Grimes has changed things. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you as always. Let me know your thoughts in the comments with my thoughts on the album, and particularly with my thoughts on what Grimes has done in general in music. I'd like to see what people think of that. But yeah, thank you as always. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can request these videos If you support me on Patreon, go check my Patreon out if you would like to do more to help this channel and help me. Thank you as always. Have a good day and goodbye.